So coming off of the previous chapter, we saw Jiro using her heartbeat surround legato on All For One, like disrupting him, and to follow up on that, Hawks attacked him, breaking off a piece of his mask. And that brings us to the beginning of this chapter, where we see Tokoyami following up on that, using quite possibly his coolest attack in the series that he calls the Abyss Black Ephemeral Ragnarok, where he's making most of Dark Shadow into like a giant fist. This is kind of similar to Luffy's Gear 3 punch, but I guess this is more so an homage to Izuku because it literally says smash here after he crushes him in the face, breaking off pretty much all of his mask. And All For One says, I should have dodged that strike with ease. My senses are lagging behind. And this is because he can't see or perceive things in a traditional sense because, you know, All Might turned his face into a potato. And he says, I've more than made up for them by getting my hands on countless sensory quirks, from infrared vision to detecting vibrations. And we actually found this out a while ago after he was initially put into Tartarus after he lost to All Might at Kamino. And that technically Jiro's attack using her quirk shouldn't be strong enough to hinder his perception, which is true. This is more so happening because his quirks are rebelling. And he says that this has never happened before. But he also says, after all, they are but fragile reproductions. And this is because the All For One that we see here is using a duplicate of like the original All For One quirk itself. After they had modified Shigaraki and made him into the current vessel that he is, they gave him the original All For One quirk, and Yujiko duplicated it and gave that version to this All For One, and I guess along with all the quirks that came with it. So that's the fragile reproductions aspect here. But I guess that also plays into the quirk singularity, which is negatively affecting All For One here. Because as I've said for a while now, All For One and One For All are kind of speed running the quirk singularity in the way that they work, because it would normally take the quirk singularity like decades to achieve its ultimate purpose of making quirks so powerful and ambiguous that they essentially end humanity. But given the way that All For One and One For All work, with them not only being able to be passed on to others, but also mixing multiple quirks into them and becoming new powers as a result, it's forcing this evolution in both of them. And we see it happen in a positive light with Izuku, as One For All had been passed on from user to user and becoming stronger every time it had been passed on. We saw that his vestiges eventually became self-aware, to the point of where they basically became like force ghosts of the previous users of One For All, and ultimately wound up helping him. But on the opposite end of the spectrum here, we're seeing that with All For One, his vestiges are also becoming self-aware, but they're not helping him. They're like rebelling against him. And because of this, the quirks that they represent are like deactivating. So that's why he was unable to dodge Tokoyami's attack here, because his perception quirks weren't working because of this rebelling here. But then he just winds up like eating the vestiges and then regains control that way. Hey, also guys, if you like my Hero content, please subscribe if you haven't already. It's fine if you don't want to, but if you just need a reminder, here you go. Thanks. Also, the vestige that we see being eaten here is the woman that we were talking about in the previous chapter that resembled Eri. And that led us to think like, hey, is, you know, Eri tied to this? Is that Eri's mom? Is All For One going to have a bigger part in her life? And I guess it was just a coincidence, because it doesn't even look like Horikoshi drew this woman with a horn like he did in the previous chapter, so I guess that's just going to end there. But after he regains control, he winds up shooting like all of these tendrils out of him. These are like the same tendrils that he used to stab Bakugo, and he uses this for multiple reasons. So first of all, he's like gathering all the broken shards of the mask and bringing them back together so that they're covering his face again. But he's also using this as a way to like impale everyone in front of him. And we see Hawks jumping in front of Tokoyami and Jiro to save them, but it was actually Endeavor coming in at the last second to save all of them. We see these tendrils are like piercing through Endeavor's right arm, and this causes Endeavor to go like full-blown goblin mode, because he's just persevering through this, but at the same time his right arm is being ripped off in the process. So Endeavor has like straight up lost his right arm at this point, and this causes him to go into like the battle manga internal dialogue exchange, where he's essentially coming to terms with himself, I guess, because we see him talking to like the younger version of himself, where it says, you're even weaker than before. Your conditions, your mistakes, your atonement, and your responsibilities, all those things ever did for you was expose how weak you really are. They turned you into the pathetic excuse for a hero you are now. So I guess he's referring to like the face-turned Endeavor that we've seen since the Pro Hero arc, where he's been coming to terms with the awful person that he became because of his endless pursuit for excellence. And we're seeing like the contrast here, the original endeavor that led to that life and the end result of the endeavor trying to break away from it. But going further, the younger version of Endeavor says, remember when you saw a father try to save his little girl from a villain and how they wound up as nothing more than scorched lumps of burning flesh? And I think this might be the deepest that we've gone into Endeavor's backstory, and possibly the youngest that we've seen him. And this might be the moment that initially inspired him to become a hero, possibly. But then going further, he says, do you remember your feelings of jealousy and inferiority towards All Might? Or the self-deprecating act of choosing a word meaning hard work as your hero name? And in this sequence, we see like the moment Endeavor was like writing down his hero name for the first time, similar to what we previously saw from like Class 1A. And I'm assuming that Endeavor himself was in Class 1A at this point. Then Endeavor grabs his younger self by the throat, but then he says, that's right, you'll never be like All Might or Deku. All this time you've been fighting a battle against your own weaknesses, so don't even think about turning over a new leaf. This is like the old aspect of him not wanting to change and wanting to continue on that flawed path of like unrelenting pragmatism to get to their ultimate goal. But Endeavor like holds him down and like burns him up, essentially killing the old version of himself here, where I guess he's basically coming to terms that, yeah, I'll never be better than All Might. I'll never even be better than Deku. And you know what? That's fine. I don't really need to be better. I just need to be who I am. And in this moment, I need to get this job done right now. And as it's dying, it says, never stop cursing your weakness. After all, it's the only thing you've been living for. And that is true, you know, the whole chasing after All Might, trying to create the perfect child, ruining not only his life, but multiple others in the process. And as this is happening, Endeavor like conjures a firearm, replacing the arm that he had lost. And he just smashes All for One with this, like completely taking off his mask and doing the most damage he's done to him by far in this whole fight. Then Endeavor says, I will never congratulate myself with a pat on the back. Ending this fight once and for all is my duty. So yeah, like I said, coming to terms with the fact that he'll never be what he calls the superhuman here. But this could possibly be Endeavor's final character arc, him coming full circle final. Even though he kind of slowly but surely has, you know, since the Pro Hero arc, but I guess it's never just been fully outright said or placed on the page the way that it is now. And also, if he does wind up defeating All for One here, and like just straight up, you know, neutralizing him completely. I mean, I'm not going to say kill him because he's just going to transfer his consciousness to Shigaraki ultimately, which I'm pretty sure is going to happen. But if he does completely take out All for One here, this in a way will be Endeavor finally surpassing All Might, since All Might never, you know, fully took out All for One. I mean, he defeated him twice, but it, you know, always led to him coming back yet again because he never completely killed him. And, you know, he's All Might. It's not what he does. But I also would like it because it's like once Endeavor finally comes to term that he doesn't need to surpass All Might is finally the moment where he does. And also considering that Endeavor is like losing his arm here, and not to mention the massive wound in his side that he took previously in this fight, which is also emphasized in this final sequence, it's possible that Endeavor is going to wind up giving his life to completely take out All for One here. And, you know, if he does, it would be somewhat of a fitting ending. Like I said, it would, you know, kind of signify him ultimately surpassing All Might and taking down the ultimate evil, and, you know, ultimately being selfless because it is his duty after all. I don't want Endeavor to die, but man, there's just so many death flags here that it wouldn't really surprise me if he winds up dying in the next chapter or maybe the one after that. But let me know what you think about this one in the comments, guys, and if you like the video, please give it a like and please subscribe if you haven't already. Have a great day. I'll see you in the next one.